Hello there, I'm Mark, and welcome to book-ramble. I've been gifted this wonderful book by a mate of mine, thank you Steve, The Penguin Book of Pirates. It's really a collection of primary sources that give a potted overview of mainly men. It starts off with Drake, what a character he was, and goes through the ones that you'll probably know or have heard of, Henry Morgan, Anne Bonny, and so on. But they're individuals that weren't around at the same time. Over a long period of history, they came and went. And when it got to the Golden Age, I thought, oh, that's excellent. I can talk about the first pre-Golden Age of certain pirates, which Henry Morgan is one, and Drake. But you know, when I was reading through it, and the reason I made a lot of notes on her name, Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen. I'd kind of heard of her, didn't know much about her, and I thought, okay, that's some person I would like to get to know. As I said in one of the previous episodes, although I can't remember if it's going to be before this one or afterwards, but I mentioned in one of the videos I titled Thoughts, I came across this. Just amazing. A graphic novel about the Pirate Queen, the Irish, supposedly flame-haired Grace O'Malley. But that wasn't her name. That was the name the English gave her. Her real name was Gráinne ní Mhaile, better known as Gráinne Wall. And her father was Duvdara, a Irish chieftain. And what we have in this book is from the time when she's a small child, with the red-headed gentleman there with the beard is her dad. And they are part of Ireland to the west, just off or up from Galway, on a little island called Clare. Became Grace's seat, so to speak, where she would end up becoming the chieftain in her own right, for various reasons, which are talked about very well in the book. Very willful child, and look at the illustrations, it's beautiful. Her father sets up, which is obviously a foreshadowing, about the fact that it was said as a legend that the O'Malleys could call in the weather. They could cause storms. And if that sounds hyperbolic or myth-laden, yes, potentially in modern eyes, but to sailors of this era, of the Tudor era, of the mid to late 16th century, the 1500s, there was a lot of superstitions. So, for instance, in the Royal Navy of almost 2 centuries later, naval ships didn't like having priests or chaplains on board because they believed it caused storms. You get this a lot in Master and Commander, the lower deck men being highly suspicious and superstitious. So it was believed, whether we accepted it or not, but for then, the people believed that they could call up storms. And the reason it's foreshadowed is because at the latter end of the book, Grace does in fact call up a storm. There. Apologise. Gráinne calls up a storm. The nemesis for her is a guy called Bingham, who she meets early on, and over decades, he's an Englishman who wants to get revenge or get one over Gráinne and her kin. So Ireland at this time was various clans trying to gain control over certain segments or areas of the island. That's crucial, because when the English came and tried to wrest the islands under their own control, and I say the English, not the Scots. Scotland and England were separate nations at this time. Ireland had some kind of affinity with the Scots, and the English, who, if you think about where they are geographically, when Henry VIII broke from Rome so that he can guess what he wanted, divorce, he created the Church of England and became Protestant. That meant nearly every country surrounding England was Catholic. French to the immediate south, Scotland to the north, although that would eventually change as well, and Ireland to the west. And England at this point in time, with the likes of Drake, Walter Raleigh, ever since Henry Cabot and a generation before, was starting to send out ships to prey on shipping, mainly Spanish, and to try and get control of lucrative Caribbean islands. Ireland was in the way. If Ireland at any point became too friendly with France and formed an alliance, it was a real threat to England. And therefore, England decided to do something about it and try and wrest control herself. And that forms what's happening here in the story. We see Grania grow up, and for various reasons, she has to become the chief of the Warriors, the O'Malleys. She faces imprisonment. This is Bingham, the nemesis. Bingham's here, who is really well portrayed in this book. And it's fun enough, although she's a pirate, a lot of it is on land. Not much is at sea, but what is at sea is quite effective. The story is of this lady, Grania, growing up, having to do the choice of becoming a chieftain to protect her children and her family and her clan. She has to start doing piracy. And that made sense, because if they could prey on English shipping and cause as much upset as possible, it make them rich, but also weaken the enemy. And that was really the only way in which they could get at England, because England had to transport over nearly everything they wanted by sea. So she became known as the Pirate Queen. And there's this fantastic scene in history and also in this book, and it's towards the end, that Grania goes to meet Queen Elizabeth, and that's an historical event. Two queens met each other, although, as Grania says in the book, she's not a queen. She's just given that title by the English as a slur. Elizabeth is portrayed quite well. We don't see much of her, but she, in a way, it's two stories. It's a story of two women. She's portrayed really quite well, and she says that, she had been captured herself and put into the Tower before she was queen. So she kind of had this resonance with Grania. It was a woman she thought she could deal with. And it turns out, according to this tale, that she could. But Bingham has other plans, and the Queen, Elizabeth, is forced to fight against Grania. So what about the story? I'm really impressed with this. There's quick movement through time. We see her grow up as a girl to a woman. She is forced through attempted assassination to become a woman with a sword, and it proves that she's very good with that. Throughout of her choices, and it could be said it's the same for the English. Are we dealing with pirates or freedom fighters? Because a pirate for one nation is a freedom fighter and a hero for another. Drake is a classic example of that. When Donal O'Flaherty, her first husband, dies, that's the catalyst for Grania to become the woman that she would be known to history for. In essence, it's a story of revenge. But at no point does Grania lose a sensitive side. Like I said before, she just is a woman who is trying to protect her own kind and family. And although it cuts through history quite quickly, we never lose sight of the fact that this is a story really about a woman forced to do things against her will. She's conflicted. She just wants to be a mother. She doesn't want to fight, but she has no other choice. That's actually well done. There is, however, an amazing bit of hyperbole in this. Historical, different era back then. but potentially it's typical with stories about pirates. A lot of it's wrapped in myth. Grania is pregnant, and she's at sea, and the English catch up with her, and there's a battle. She has a baby, nonetheless. And despite the fact that the English commander comes knocking at the door, we then see Grania. Oh, there she is. She's got a crossbow, babe in arms, just born, and she literally skewers and kills the enemy. May have happened. I don't know. Either way, what that shows, even if it's Tony Lee and Sam Hart, and, artistic license, I'd love them to answer, what it was. But what it does show is that even at her most vulnerable moments, Grania was unlike another woman. She got up and she fought and did it successfully. Makes a point. It's very good at world building, this graphic novel. Beautifully colorized, with some excellent artwork. Really glad I found it. And it brings to life not just Grania, but her world, her motivations, her actions. And right at the end, she goes to meet Queen Elizabeth, ends up going back to Ireland. She's got her sword out and she's saying, I'll read it. Some wars only end in blood and pain. Come on, O'Malley's. It's time to defend our lands again. Now notice that the picture here shows her slightly older. And I thought, oh, why is that? Until you read it just below it. And it's like all good things. It wraps up really well. This is not Grania saying this. This is like the narrator. The O'Malleys fought the English again throughout the 9 Years' War. Grace O'Malley never stopped defending her homeland. She died aged 73 in 1603 at her home, surrounded by her family. It was the same year that Queen Elizabeth I died. Amazing. A bit of information about Tony Lee and Sam Hart, and uncolorized rough drawings. Beautifully done. Just a final thing, and I'm beginning to think, the more I think about it, this was done deliberately. I must admit, this is probably more myself. So, Queen Elizabeth and the Pirate Queen meet. And where my finger's here, that's Queen Elizabeth. She's got this thing behind her neck. It's this here. And you see it here where my finger is. But more importantly here, the fan seems to come up much more pronounced. There's a character in Warhammer Fantasy for the Vampire Counts called Isabella von Karstein, and I just kept thinking of her because she's a vampire and she's always depicted with this fan behind her head. And it just reminded me of that, especially here, where it seems to be like some kind of bat wings or something in my mind. It's just amazing. But anyway, a wonderful graphic novel. Really glad I've read it. And it's just wonderful that a female pirate is remembered and given prominence in a graphic novel. Grania ni Walia. Excellent. And at the back, revered by her countrymen and feared by her enemies, Grace, Grania, will bring the fight across the sea and onto English soil, where she will confront her greatest adversary, Queen Elizabeth I. So there you go. Pirate Queen. The Legend of Grania or Walia. Ta-ta for now.